The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on the demand and supply of agricultural products and essential services. In this section, we will explore how the pandemic has affected different aspects of the food system, such as production, consumption, trade, prices, and labor. One of the main effects of the pandemic on the demand side was the shift from food service to food retail. As restaurants, schools, hotels, and other food service outlets closed or reduced their operations due to lockdowns and social distancing measures, consumers increased their purchases of food at grocery stores and online platforms. This shift in demand created challenges for some farmers and processors who had to adjust their packaging, distribution, and marketing channels to reach different customers. For example, dairy farmers faced excess milk supplies as demand from schools and restaurants plummeted, while some meat processors had to repackage their products for retail instead of food service. Another effect of the pandemic on the demand side was the change in consumer preferences and behavior. Some consumers increased their demand for healthy, local, and organic foods, as well as for convenience foods that require less preparation time. Others reduced their spending on food due to income losses or uncertainty. The pandemic also affected the demand for certain commodities in specific markets, such as ethanol and cotton, which saw reduced demand due to lower fuel consumption and clothing sales. On the supply side, one of the main effects of the pandemic was the disruption of production due to labor shortages and health risks. Many agricultural workers, especially those who are undocumented or migrant, faced challenges such as lack of access to health care, protective equipment, testing, and sick leave. Some workers also faced travel restrictions or border closures that prevented them from reaching their destinations. The pandemic also exposed the vulnerability of some agricultural sectors that rely on a few large processing facilities that became hotspots for outbreaks. For example, several meatpacking plants had to shut down or reduce their capacity due to infections among workers, leading to backlogs of animals on farms and higher prices for consumers. Another effect of the pandemic on the supply side was the disruption of trade due to transportation difficulties and policy measures. Some countries imposed export restrictions or bans on certain agricultural products to ensure domestic food security or support domestic prices. Other countries faced logistical challenges such as delays at ports, border crossings, or airports due to reduced staff, quarantine requirements, or sanitary inspections. The pandemic also affected the availability and cost of inputs such as seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and machinery parts. The pandemic has had a mixed impact on agricultural prices depending on the commodity and market situation. Some commodities saw price increases due to supply shocks or higher demand, such as wheat, rice, soybeans, corn, eggs, and cheese. Other commodities saw price declines due to demand shocks or lower input costs, such as oilseeds, sugar, coffee, cocoa, beef, pork, and poultry. The pandemic also widened the gap between farm-level and retail-level prices for some products due to processing bottlenecks or increased marketing costs. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of agriculture and essential workers for food security and public health. It has also exposed the challenges and risks that these workers face in their daily lives. The pandemic has also shown the need for more resilience and flexibility in the food system to cope with shocks and uncertainties. As the pandemic continues to evolve, it is crucial to monitor its impacts on the demand and supply of agricultural products and essential services and to provide adequate support and protection for farmers and workers. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating impact on many sectors of the economy, but perhaps none more so than agriculture and essential workers. These workers are responsible for producing, processing, transporting, and distributing food and other necessities to millions of consumers. However, they face numerous challenges and risks due to the pandemic, such as labor shortages, health hazards, low wages, and lack of protection. One of the main challenges facing agriculture and essential workers is the labor shortage. According to the U.S. Department of Labor's National Agricultural Workers Survey, NAWS, about half of crop workers are foreign-born, and many of them rely on temporary visas such as the H-2A program to work legally in the United States. However, due to travel restrictions, border closures, and visa delays caused by the pandemic, many foreign workers have been unable to enter or return to the country. This has left many farms and processing plants understaffed and struggling to meet the demand for food. Another challenge is the health and safety of agriculture and essential workers. These workers are often exposed to close contact with other workers, customers, or animals, increasing their risk of contracting or spreading the virus. Moreover, many of them lack adequate personal protective equipment, PPE, such as masks, gloves, or sanitizers, to protect themselves and others. Furthermore, many of them do not have access to health insurance, paid sick leave, or testing and treatment services, making it harder for them to seek medical care or stay home when they are sick. As a result, there have been numerous outbreaks of COVID-19 among agriculture and essential workers across the country. The labor shortage and the health risks in these sectors have serious implications for the quality, safety, and affordability of food and other necessities. For example, some farms have had to reduce their production or leave crops unharvested due to lack of workers. Some processing plants have had to shut down or operate at reduced capacity due to outbreaks among workers. Some transporters and distributors have had to face delays or disruptions due to border controls or quarantine measures. These factors have led to shortages of some food products in grocery stores or restaurants, as well as higher prices for consumers. Moreover, these factors have also compromised the safety and quality of food products, as some workers may not follow proper hygiene or sanitation practices due to lack of training or equipment. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the vulnerability and importance of agriculture and essential workers in the food supply chain. These workers are essential for ensuring that consumers have access to food and other necessities during this crisis. However, they also face many challenges and risks that affect their well-being and livelihoods. Therefore, it is crucial that policymakers and employers take measures to protect and support these workers, such as providing them with adequate PPE, health insurance, paid sick leave, testing and treatment services, as well as ensuring that they receive fair wages and working conditions. By doing so, they can also ensure that the food supply chain remains resilient and reliable for everyone. The hiring gap in agriculture and essential workers is a serious problem that affects the food supply chain, the economy, and the well-being of millions of workers. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, hired farm workers make up less than 1% of all U.S. wage and salary workers, but they play an essential role in U.S. agriculture. However, many farm workers are undocumented immigrants who face low wages, poor working conditions, limited labor rights and heightened vulnerability to COVID-19. The farm worker wage gap can be traced to the legacy of slavery, and was codified at the behest of Southern members of Congress in the 1930s, when the federal government intentionally excluded farm workers and domestic workers, then majority black, from the bulk of labor protections afforded by the New Deal-era Federal Fair Labor Standards Act and the National Labor Relations Act. As a result, farm workers earn just $14.62 per hour on average in 2020, far less than even some of the lowest paid workers in the U.S. labor force. They also earned less than workers with the lowest levels of education. How can this situation be improved? How can the government and private sector address the hiring gap by providing incentives, training and support to workers and employers? Here are some possible solutions. The government should take immediate action to improve labor standards for all farmworkers and provide migrant farmworkers with a path to citizenship. This would reduce their exploitation, increase their bargaining power and improve their living conditions. It would also help stabilize the agricultural workforce and reduce labor shortages. The government should also increase the minimum wage for farm workers and ensure that they receive overtime pay, sick leave, health insurance and other benefits that are standard for other workers. This would make farm work more attractive and competitive with other sectors, and reduce the wage gap between farm workers and other low-wage workers. The private sector should invest in training and education programs for farm workers and essential workers, especially those who are undocumented or have limited English proficiency. This would help them acquire new skills, improve their productivity and quality of work, and increase their opportunities for career advancement and mobility. The private sector should also adopt fair trade practices and ethical sourcing standards that reward farmers and employers who treat their workers with dignity and respect. This would create a market incentive for improving labor conditions and wages in agriculture and essential industries, and benefit consumers who care about social justice and environmental sustainability. These are some of the ways that the hiring gap in agriculture and essential workers can be addressed by providing incentives, training and support to workers and employers. By doing so, we can ensure that these workers are valued and rewarded for their essential role in society, and that they can enjoy a decent quality of life.